This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
I want to welcome you to a special edition of the show. Jesperson here with John Hicks. We're going to be spending today taking a look at some of the stories that are making news for sure. There's a breaking story out of Ontario that has a little bit to do with a story out of BC that we covered just a short time ago, 5 or 6 episodes ago, as BC moved to recriminalize drug use in public spaces. You remember we talked to a couple of experts in that field, and in particular, Guy Felicella, who's a recovery expert. His lived experience is amazing. Mo Amir, a talk show host at Vancouver, joined us for that recriminalization episode. Thought it was really good, insightful commentary. Well, the province of Ontario is now jumping in, telling Toronto that they're basically going to take over. They're saying they're going to have to intervene if Toronto continues with its request. This is a request for an exemption, basically kind of like a Health Canada exemption to legislation that would allow for so-called illicit drug consumption in public spaces, similar to what Vancouver was looking for. This is what prompted that whole Pierre Poilievre wacko policy Justin Trudeau exchange a while ago. I don't have to say, do you remember that? Because you obviously remember that. That was about this. So we're going to look at that in a second. We've got some of your emails locked and loaded. King Charles has his new portrait out. I'm not sure. Johnny and I have not talked about this ahead of time. We decided to save it for when the mics were cracked.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you think about this, but we'll get to that in just a second as well.
I hate art.
you do hate art. Who was that? That was someone in our live chat a while ago that I think accused you of hating art a while ago. So we'll get into the King Charles portrait, but some really insightful comments from Real Talkers. One of them from a counselor, an elected counselor. We appreciated your note yesterday. You know who you are. We'll get to you in a second. Who was moved by our episode. This was our May 15th episode talking about the cities of the future and what they're going to look like. We were looking for another excuse to talk about the Nathan Fillion Civilian Pavilion in Edmonton, but Calgary's council had just made it through a marathon 16-day council meeting. Almost 1,000 people spoke at it. All had to do with rezoning. So we're talking about the future of cities and got a great comment from a listener who also happens to be an elected official. So we'll get to your follow-up on that. We never want to ask you for your feedback, ask you for your emails, and then never leave time to get to them. You know? So today we're making some of that time to get into the Real Talk mailbag. Now, this episode is presented by Rello, and you know that it's Alberta's top real estate school. But speaking of emails and speaking of testimonials, I love this one from JR. We just got this yesterday in the afternoon. JR said, I am a faithful listener to Real Talk, and I love hearing your testimonials. When you guys have mentioned like complete care restoration or California closets and how your partners are oftentimes going the extra mile, JR says, so I wanted to share my own. Says, I've spent the last year working on my commercial real estate license, and I purchased the course through an unnamed provider in Alberta, but when I went to write my exam in February, I could not believe the questions on the exam. None of them had been covered in the course materials. JR says, I've never failed an exam before, so I was in complete shock. So I studied the materials over again. I even contacted the course provider who told me they didn't have anybody on their team that could explain one of the main parts of the exam. So I did my best to figure it out on YouTube. I went in to write the exam again 2 weeks later, and guess what? I failed again. JR says, so I heard you talking about Rello on Real Talk. After I failed my real estate exam for the second time, I signed up for Rello. I used your promo code. That's Ryan100. He says, Rello's material was very different from my original course provider. They were way more precise on their explanations. And Rello even offered a live workshop every Saturday with a seasoned real estate veteran who walked me through the areas that were tricky. 2 weeks after signing up with Rello, I took my real estate exam for a third time, and I easily passed. JR says, I'm now 2 months into my new career. I'm absolutely loving it. I'm barely able to keep up with the busy commercial real estate activity in my neck of the woods. Thank you, Rello. That from JR, who sent us an email, a testimonial to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Don't forget, if you use the promo code Ryan100 at rello.ca, that's RELO.ca, they're going to knock $100 off both the Alberta Residential Real Estate Bundle and the Alberta Commercial Real Estate Bundle. Love hearing from Real Talkers that have what has, either gone to Rello or worked with some of our other partners and have found, that what we're talking about, what we're saying about those partners is true. Because we're putting our name to it. We're putting our face to it. We're voicing these spots live in real time, and we don't partner with people that we don't believe in. So an email like that makes our day, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
That conversation yesterday, it wasn't like typically where we would normally go. It wasn't like heavy politics. There wasn't like a lot of angst and anger going back and forth, although I guess when you start talking about Calgary's 16-day council meeting on that blanket rezoning bylaw, there was obviously some strong feelings there. But I was really impressed with our panelists yesterday. That was obviously we're talking about sort of city building. We were talking about what they call placemaking. If you don't know what that is, make sure you check out that episode of Real Talk. That's the May 15th episode. You're looking for the title, Your City Will Look a Lot Different, and Here's How. We were talking to Amos Kiner-Nonikis from Vignettes. He's a designer. Kaylin Anderson, who's a CEO and a well-known city planner, former planning director at the City of Edmonton, and then Punita McBrien, of course, who's the CEO of the Edmonton Downtown Business Association. It was a great episode. You can find it on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. In a second, I want to get to this message that we received from a counselor. But Johnny, you did a great job, I thought, kind of summarizing about an hour's worth of commentary into 1 minute. For our YouTube short. I thought you did a really good job. And I thought for people that maybe didn't catch the episode yesterday that want to hear it summed up in 60 seconds, here's us musing about whether or not, and I'm asking the question tongue-in-cheek. I get it. I get how democracy works. I get the purpose of public hearings. I get it. But 1,000 people, 16 days? Really? Anyway, here's where the conversation went.
I've never heard in Canada of 1,000 people registering to speak. Hats off to those city clerks and councillors and administrators and all the folks who lined up and waited for their turn to come up on day 8.
If I hear of 1,000 people that want to speak at a town hall, that's like reason number 47 why I would never be a city councillor, because I don't think that I could listen to 1,000 different perspectives on something.
I once got a threatening tweet from a guy who claimed to be from the Surface Parking Lot Owners Rights Association.
What?
Because he didn't like that I was saying that surface parking lots shouldn't all be gravel and crumbling.
There are obviously going to be some tough decisions that are made in the interest of the city that people that come to public hearing are opposed to. A lot of those are good decisions that when you take it in the grand scheme of things 2 years later are good decisions that city council makes, even though people came to speak against it.
Go to any public hearing any day of the week in any town.
The angry folks are more likely to show up.
Nobody shows up to say, I love your land use designation update.
I thought that was
That's
really good.
true, though. When we were talking about it yesterday, I immediately was like, I don't think anyone shows up to like a city council meeting or a community engagement session with like a list of good things. They're there to bitch. That's the only reason someone would take time out of their day, especially a work day, between 8 and noon. You just know what to expect.
But I do think, and I am kind of joking when I'm like, I'm the part I'm not joking about is reason 47 why I'd never be a city councilor. But I'm so grateful that we do have people that put in the time that desire to be public servants in that capacity.
And that's what it's for. I get that.
For sure.
But there's no way those people don't wake up in the morning, they look in the mirror and they're like, oh God, today's the one. Like, you know what I mean? They're doing push-ups. They go to bed early the night before. They take 2 Advil ahead of time because they know it's just hours. And then to have days of that?
I know.
Oh
and I'm not certainly speaking for any city councilors, obviously, but I'm just telling you, if I was in that room and I'm sitting in one of those chairs, like I am not listening to you.
No.
I'm sorry. Like I look like I am listening to you, but I'm on my Instagram. I'm on my LinkedIn. I'm spending more time on LinkedIn, by the way. I don't know if you've noticed. I'm really trying to work on that. I think it's part of growing up, spending less time on TikTok and more time on LinkedIn. Who have I become?
It's more positive over there.
I did get an email. I got a response to our Instagram post on this. You can follow Real Talk on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, at Real Talk RJ, from Cam. And I appreciate this from Cam McFadden, who said, he goes, yeah, Jessica, because you're talking about this, like how Calgary has 1,000 people, takes 16 days to go through. He goes, Edmonton passed it with little to no consultation. Mm-hmm. That should be just as scary. That from Cam. And Kaylin did touch on that. She talked about how Edmonton approached this rezoning very differently than Calgary did. There was some protest. I know I mentioned Kevin Taft's name yesterday. The real politicos will remember Kevin Taft from, what is it? What's his vintage? Like early 2000s, Alberta Liberal leader-ish. And Kevin was kind of leading a group that was really, really choked about how the rezoning was going. These are the folks, and I'm not disparaging these folks. They have their perspective. I get it. Like, not everybody wants density everywhere. And by the way, it's okay to feel how you feel about something. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise.
But
we understand cities need density. They need to grow up. They can't
It's
always
inevitable.
grow out,
It's inevitable.
right? They do need to grow up. The cores need to be healthy. That's just obvious. We can't spread ourselves too thin with sewage and fire halls and schools. And like, we get it. You know, schools are dying on the vine in the inner city in a lot of cities. And meantime, they're building brand new ones in the suburbs. Explain to me how that makes sense. So, you know, there is that, and there is that angle. But I just kind of think, you know, you get to the point where, are there any new perspectives coming to the table with the 994th person that's speaking to this, right?
it was
So,
I just picture like you all sit down, you get the counselors, whoever, and then the first guy comes up and he pulls out his notes from his pocket. You know what I mean? And he
And they're
puts
all
them
like,
on the podium.
yeah.
And immediately, like, you're just like,
here we
oh
go.
my God.
Here
Like,
we go.
I would rather have someone go through like 1,000 emails and look for keywords and then just address
But then you'll get people saying they're
sections
censoring.
of the email, like,
You know, yeah.
address big batches of emails according to keywords, like this reply for people who mentioned 50-minute city.
Yeah.
This reply for, you know what I mean?
It's true.
Because like at least
You need
at least everyone's
spokespersons.
getting a personal, not personal, but at least everyone's getting a reply. Because otherwise,
Yeah.
like there's no way to deal with that.
You want to say
volume.
sort of, we have heard you on this, we have heard you on this.
Yeah,
Here's
here's
the
our
position
stance
on
on
this.
this.
You know, and there's not obviously even collective stances on councils. Like this vote in Calgary, what was it? I think 9-6 or something like that. So you know, I mean, it's not like it was unanimous. Very rare. Seventh Pilot in the chat notes says the Liberals, the federal government instructed this type of rezoning, made it a condition to housing funding, and to a certain degree that is true. The federal Liberals have made housing money, like hundreds of millions of dollars, available to municipalities that have made commitments to certain things like rezoning in certain areas to allow for density, right? So this means that in a lot of areas of certain cities, including Calgary that we're talking about, Edmonton, maybe in your city, depending on where you're listening to this, you know, what typically has been the single family zoning, like the single family dwelling, they're now going to allow for duplexes, fourplexes, some condos. And that's what like the Kevin Taft-led group, I apologize, I can't remember the name of the collective, but you know, they love there's these big, beautiful neighborhoods. Every city has them. You know, I think of Montreal. You know, I grew up in Calgary, like Mount Royal would be an area in Calgary like this. In Edmonton, Laurier would be an area like this. Rio Terrace, you know, Crestwood, where you've got these big, beautiful pie lots, the like 50 by 150 or bigger lots, you know, and everybody loves those big yards. They love the huge trees. They love the fact that the streets are quiet. They love the fact that they can park right in front of their house. And save the emails. I know that you don't own the street in front of your house, and I know that some neighbors some wars are waged in neighborhoods over who's parking in front of whose house, but that's a big thing. So when someone sees, you know, a bungalow that hasn't seen love or attention since the 40s or 50s torn down and two skinnies go up, right? Or torn down and maybe a fourplex goes up on the corner of a street, all of a sudden people lose their minds because that's like the vibe of the neighborhood is changing. The look, the feel of the neighborhood is changing.
Sure,
so,
but
and those people, I will say, those people do have a certain point.
They
It
do.
does change the feel of a neighborhood, but that's also kind of the point.
Yeah.
Because you look at the way that it is now, and you look at the fact that they're expecting Alberta's population to double over the next 30 to 40 years. Yeah. I think the safe folks, the non-political conservative, the conservative betters on this will say maybe over the next 50 years. But where are they all going to go?
Sure. And my wife, we were just talking about this the other day. My partner's like, hey, you know, look at this 70s style bungalow that, you know, probably will get torn down if it's not sold. And she showed me a listing online, and it looks incredible. It's got character. It's distinct. It's original. But then, Ryan, you've also got today when I'm driving to work, down Gateway, you come over, you make the turn, you go over Walterdale Bridge. Just before or when you go up that hill after Walterdale to come downtown, look on your right. Those decrepit homes is anyone even living in these? They're on a slant. They're older. So, I mean, I guess you have to go case by case. But I would love to see those, you know, on that street repurposed into something that looks a little nicer, that can house a little more people. On the other hand, the one my wife showed me, I would love to see that saved. So I think it's case by case basis, but just because something is rezoned doesn't mean that everything's just going to get destroyed with, a big hammer. And but I do get people's fears, because I do see these homes that are like beautiful and they just need a little love and care, and, and they can be back to their former glory.
But it's like not everybody wants to do that either, and it
Nobody
doesn't always
wants
make
to do
financial
it.
sense.
You want to tear apart
so
walls,
full
look at
disclosure, like
pipes
we don't, we live in an area of the city, and we love living there. That is, it's like an architectural heritage zone, so it's kind of protected in a way. So you can't just knock down a house and put up a big all glass square modern structure. There are a lot of options that the other homeowners or other property owners on that street have to challenge. Like, number one, you won't get a development permit that doesn't fit the vibe of the neighborhood. I'm not getting into the nitty gritty of the wording of it, but in normal person language, the house has to look, if you're going to build a new house, which you can't force someone to do a $200,000 new foundation and to renovate an old house that they don't want to rent. You can't force that.
But you're saying they can't put up a modern 2-story, $2 million
so to get your
infill.
development permit, like to get the permit to build the house has to fit the vibe of the street. And if the house doesn't, and then it goes, and we've received a couple of these letters over the past few years, then it goes to all the other neighbors. And then it says, like, here's your opportunity to appeal this or whatever. And some folks really make other folks' lives difficult.
Of course.
I've told you the story before. There was a friend of mine. I'm obviously not going to say
committee.
his name. I'm obviously not going to say where the house is, but a friend of ours who also lives in the architectural heritage zone. They knocked down an old house. The house was falling down. Like, nobody was saving that house. It wasn't worth saving. It'd be a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 renovation. I'm not even joking. Like, it wouldn't even be studs out. Like, you'd have to, like, it was like a mess. And then they built like a beautiful new home, but it just barely fits the vibe of it. Do you know what I mean? It just barely. And so they were tied up in the appeal process for a long time because other people, like he told me, I told the story on the show before, this little old lady walking her dog walks up to him. She's walking past the house, and he says they've moved in. They've been in there for like 2 weeks. This little old lady, like in her 80s, walking her dog. And he's like out in front of the yard, and he's whatever, maybe planting flowers or something in the new house. And he goes, hello. And the lady, this little old lady goes, nice fucking grain elevator. Like, not happy at all at what he built on the street. So they were getting this, but I was telling you, they had a construction fence up around the property while the house was being built. And not everybody on the street, but some of the people on the street, when they're walking their dogs and they're picking up the doggy doo-doo and the dog bags, they were hanging all the bags on the fence. Like, this is how they were feeling about this guy building this house on this street.
Oh, man.
This was like a regular, ongoing thing. The neighbors were sending a message. I told you there's a guy. This is the same house. These are all stories from the same house. I'm not naming the guy, obviously, but if you live in our neighborhood, you know what I'm talking about. There's a guy on that street with a snowblower that this sounds funny when I say blows the whole block, but you know what I'm saying. He snow blows the entire sidewalk, but when he's walking past their house, he pushes down on the handle and lifts the snowblower up so he does not clear their snow, and then drops it back down and keeps clearing the entire sidewalk. So people are very protective of the vibe of their street.
I don't know which side to be on this. On one hand, I'm like, good for the community for coming together. Great that you don't want like all the old heritage buildings destroyed, trampled, and all these modern buildings go up. Great that you don't want people with tons of money to come in and change a whole community. But on the other hand, this is like all the families from Edward Scissorhands, the movie. It just like,
I need to rewatch that.
And
movie.
also in my mind, 80 years old, like these people are going to be gone in a decade. So the people that are there now investing in your community around you, like, man, the pyramids are still here, but everything around it is gone. Like that community over time is going to change no matter how hard you push, no matter how many fences you put up, no matter how many committee meetings you have. Eventually, the people around you, they're going to age, they're going to die. Like, communities are going to change.
Yeah.
Like, right now, Edmonton, we just need to keep building, keep getting bigger and better. And if you can knock down a house and put four residences in there, that's probably a good thing right now.
I was not at any of the Calgary meetings, obviously. Couldn't pay me enough. But it sounds like Alyssa was. Alyssa's a great contributor to our live chat. I appreciate this. And I think I probably know what she's getting at. But she says seeing the racist and classist remarks from many of the people at these meetings in Calgary was enough to make me a rabid supporter of the rezoning. If the racists hate it, then it's good for me. And what I'm guessing Alyssa's talking about is that kind of like underpinning undertone of people like if you start allowing for multifamily dwellings, they're going to start moving in.
Who's going to be on the front lawn?
Right. Who's going to be there? Who's going to live here?
When I hear the word heritage.
Where are they coming from? Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that's probably, and I'm sure that was a part of, I saw a little bit of that in our chat yesterday, to be honest. And I would imagine that there was probably quite a bit of that in the Calgary council meetings. Drastic change of tone. I don't know if you even know this. I might be telling you this because I didn't know it until our live chat just told me this. Longtime sportscaster, formerly the pride of ITV in Edmonton, I believe. Johnny, you have his picture, so you knew. I didn't know until 5 minutes ago. I feel like I just got punched in the face. Darren Dutchyshen, dead. And it sounds like, and I'm just relying on you on the live chat, I don't know. Sounds like he was fighting cancer. I had no idea.
Prostate cancer.
Prostate cancer.
So 2020,
Shit, man.
2019 diagnosed. Then he took some time off. I believe he had some measures, chemo, stuff like that. He came back in 2021. I remember the show. I was watching it. Jennifer or whatever, the other sports
Jennifer
host.
Hedger,
Yeah, she was like, you're one of the best to ever do it with a bullet, no doubt. And he literally was so honest on the broadcast. He said that he hadn't beaten it, but that he did not feel like being at home. He felt like the best place for him was at work. He was feeling better, but it was still... I think he beat the prostate cancer, but it spread in other parts of his body. At any rate, he passed away with friends and family.
Wow.
Last night.
I'm rattled. And I didn't, to be honest, I didn't even know he was sick. And so this is just kind of one of those things. But I would just say, like, you know, he was obviously an institution in sports broadcasting in Canada and beloved. In Edmonton's graduated. I know we're talking a lot about Edmonton, our hometown, in this show, but like Edmonton has graduated some of the like all-timers, sports broadcasters across the country. A lot of them have come through Edmonton, and he is certainly one of those. Just on a technical side, the way that he did his job, can I just say, like, his voice was so velvety and so commanding without trying. Like, he just had a real presence on the desk, and he was jacked. He was that guy.
I remember he would always post the pictures too, and
he was ripped. That
this
guy.
Is another thing that we've been talking about. What is in the water these days? Here's a guy who like doesn't smoke, goes to the gym 5 days a week, clearly eats pretty healthy. I don't know his lifestyle outside of that, but like. It's pretty 57 years old. That's, you know,
this is a good reminder as well. I mean, so if it was indeed prostate cancer, sounds like it was, you know, just a reminder, fellas, like maybe we'll just take this opportunity. I was actually talking to the CEO from the Prostate Cancer Center yesterday.
I have to do this.
We're going to, yeah, you do, man. We're going to do something with the Prostate Cancer Center in September. So I don't need to bother you with that now, but it's just interesting timing. You know, I have an uncle that beat prostate cancer early. My grandfather died of prostate cancer. Everyone's been impacted, I think, by prostate and breast cancer. Those are kind of the two that I refer to together because both the numbers are approximately 1 in 6. Yeah. Approximately 1 in 6 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in her lifetime. Approximately 1 in 6 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer. It is prostate cancer, one of the most beatable cancers if it's detected early. And so this is a sign, maybe. This is our ask to you. And this is our commitment. So Johnny, well, I'm not going to speak for you, but I think we can make a commitment to you guys, fellas. If you're over the age of 40, or especially if you have this in your family history, from one guy to another, you have to get checked every single year. Like it or not, you absolutely have to go for your annual physical. If you find prostate cancer early, it's like 90% beatable in most circumstances. If you don't detect it early, if you don't find it early, if you're like most guys and you don't go to the doctor and you think that your ailments are just going to go away, because typically that's what our aches and pains do. We limp around or we can't write with our hand because we think it's tendonitis and we diagnose ourselves. And I'm just describing myself. Yeah. I'm just talking about myself. Yeah. But our aches and pains go away. And so then we don't go see the doctor. And then the next thing you know, and I'm not talking about Darren Dutchyshen, by the way. I'm just saying, generally speaking, it's so important to get checked. So for your wife, for your girlfriend, for your buddies, for your parents, do it for somebody else. If you're not doing it for yourself, get your annual physical, talk to your doctor, make sure you do. And I'm just sort of still processing this. I can't believe Dutchy's gone, but our thoughts, obviously our condolences to his family, to the TSN family, and to everybody that knew him personally. I never had a chance to actually meet him. I never met him.
Well, I spoke with him briefly. He was on the Hedge.
Oh
I
yeah,
believe,
with
for
Andrew
an
Walker, the
appearance
show
with
we used to
Andrew.
produce. Yeah.
So
Huh.
yeah, but never met him personally. But just one of those guys. You turn on the TV and it's like you feel like you're his friend, right? He was one of those guys who had that personality. It didn't matter what he was saying. He reached through the screen and kind of pulled up a seat next to you on the couch, right?
Yeah.
And I remember hearing about this diagnosis and the same way as Alex Trebek, like when we heard about his diagnosis as well. I'm going to beat it. And you have all this faith in them because they're so positive, right? And that's what I thought had happened when he actually came back to the desk. But I couldn't believe when he said it on air, no, I haven't beaten it.
Yes.
It's actually,
Yeah.
in other parts of my body. But this is the only place I feel good is at work.
Shit, man. Egg with an interesting comment in our chat says, cancer isn't a battle. Sickness isn't a battle. Please rethink the metaphor. You don't lose a battle to cancer. It's a disease. Everyone can, and I don't know Egg's background, like maybe Egg has cancer, so like doesn't need me lecturing them on the words that we use. I understand. You know what I will say, I have a friend right now, a personal friend. I don't know if she wants me talking about her by name, but I've shared with you guys a little bit. I'm not going to talk about it too much because I'm having a very hard time with it. But she's now down in the United States. We're crowdfunding her treatment as best we can. It's going to be about $350,000. We're doing everything we can because she is just getting walloped by this disease. She's not like, you know, she's so young and it's just so hard. And I've talked about this on the show before, and I know so many of you are walking miles in these same shoes. I know some of you are fighting cancer right now. This is personal for you. And so for me, I like the word battle because my friend, she is battling every single day, and she will not cede an inch if she doesn't have to. She's fighting. She's doing every single thing she can. But Egg, what I love about your comment and what I relate to and what I agree with, Johnny, I've never appreciated when somebody says, you know, whether it's an obituary or condolence, when someone says they lost their battle to cancer. And maybe that's what Egg's getting at. I never have liked the phrasing or the wording of they've lost it. They lost their fight. They lost their battle. These are people that fought to the very end under unimaginable pain, unimaginable circumstance, you know, cancer taking a toll like almost no other disease, although we don't need to compare. You want to get started on ALS or something like that, MS. I mean, they're all brutal. But like, I've never liked the phrase losing the battle, but I sure like the active verb battling. Does that make sense?
I don't think there's anything wrong with the battle thing.
Yeah.
I think every journey with cancer is definitely a battle. I don't know anyone who's gone through it or someone I know who knows someone who's gone through it who hasn't said it's absolutely horrible and ravaging. And now, like, we just talked about this on a show a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's more and more people, younger and younger all the time, getting diagnosed. I don't think anyone knows anyone who hasn't dealt with this
No,
stuff.
man. How about this from Ken, who says, make sure to get a fit test every year after you turn 50. Sadly, we don't allow colonoscopies now without a positive fit test. I didn't know that, which
Not
means
to mention the waiting list.
Ken says you might already have colon cancer. This is an interesting one. How about this from Acute Awareness? This is a tough one. This is a gut punch. Acute Awareness says, I went to a funeral for a 21-year-old girl that found out she had a brain tumor because she shaved her head to raise funds for cancer. Oh, wow. Acute Awareness goes on to say, I've never sobbed so hard in my life. She made sure all of the people attending had candy, and they played Avril Lavigne at the funeral. Wow. And then there's people trolling me for my comments on cancer in the live chat. It's such a pleasure to be independent and work for yourself, so you can just tell people to go fuck themselves. I mean, I honestly, that's just, I was never able to do that on the radio. Certainly never on breakfast television.
Sure,
Yeah, they frowned upon us telling viewers to go fuck themselves, but here we can, which is just a really beautiful thing. You know what I
Before
mean?
we close this section, I will just put the caveat at the end here that we've talked about this. Cancer rates are up, but people beating cancer, those rates are also up.
Amen.
Because people are recognizing it earlier. They're going and getting tested earlier. The methods and technology and treatment for cancer has, evolved so much over time. So yes, rates of cancer are up, but people are also beating it lots. So
I love that. Can you tell that I'm like scrolling? Hey, for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see this. So this is, and I do want everyone to know as I'm about to show you this, because some of you are going to hate me for this, including Johnny. Johnny hates it every time he hears our printer fire up. But I'm a little old school. I print things off to keep them in front of me. That's just how my brain works. I want you to know, Real Talk is committed to recycling. We are doing our best to be environmentally responsible, but I sometimes do have, look at this stack of papers in front of me, you guys. What is that, an inch thick? These are all emails, and none of these are more than 8 weeks old, okay? These are all current, and we go through and I curate them and whatever. So it's like sometimes if a guest doesn't show up or something like that, or whatever, we can just get into some emails. So these are all the ones. We got some flamethrowers in here, by the way. Tranquil Vibes, you're getting your flamethrower read tomorrow on Friday, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Jeffrey, you're getting your flamethrower read tomorrow. Wanted to let you. Todd, you're getting your flamethrower read about Erica Baruti's. Just wait till you hear this one, Johnny. But why I'm looking through here is because there was one from Harry that we received. You remember you and I were talking about cancer rates in the young a while ago, and Harry reached out and he said, I just wanted to pass along an article. We appreciate so much when you reach out and you say to us, here's a guest that you may be interested in having on the show, or here's a podcast that resonated with me, or here's an article about the thing you were just talking about. This is why we love you guys, Real Talkers. And so Harry wrote in and said, Johnny was talking about why cancer rates are increasing in the young. He says the short answer, there's likely many things contributing. Nobody can explain it fully, but there's an article published in Nature last month, and you can just Google why are so many young people getting cancer in Nature, and you'll find it. He says the article mentions risk factors like obesity, increased consumption of processed foods. Johnny, you and I talked about that. Alcohol consumption. Shout out to my friend who just reached 30 days of sobriety yesterday. I'm so proud of you. You know who you are. Harry says there's also research into whether changes in the gut microbiome can increase risk as well. He says high levels of sedentary behavior also known to increase cancer risk. We're going, well, yeah, obviously, right? He says practicing palliative care, the majority of people we care for, Harry works in palliative care, thank you for what you do, says the majority of people we care for have cancer. Many of our patients are young. He says, I appreciate when you ask the audience to take time to feel, to take time to express gratitude. And it goes without saying that our time on earth is limited. Our time spent in good health is limited as well. And unfortunately, that time is shorter than one would expect. Taking the time to feel grateful for all that's positive in our lives and in the world can be very powerful of an exercise. With that said, says Harry, we should actively work to create a world, including right here in our home cities, that promotes and encourages good health, that reduces the risk of illness and injury. We should also properly invest in our healthcare system so that when we and our loved ones inevitably require medical care, we know that those care needs will be met. Thanks for Real Talk's continued work. Have a great rest of your week. That from Harry. Thanks, Harry. We appreciate it. Harry, if you happen to be listening, I wanted to let you know that we have an ask-in currently with the author of that piece in Nature. We've asked her to join us. She's in the UK right now, so we're going to make sure that works out. I like how he says that, like, when our loved ones inevitably require medical care. I remember when we were doing an episode on disability supports, maybe, 6 months ago, there was a message in the chat that jumped out and stuck with me. I don't remember who it was, but one of our audience members said, all of us at some point will lose our mobility, or all of us at some point in some way will become disabled, right? And I thought that was a really intuitive comment there. Listen, we're going to get to some of your emails. I want to take a look at this story out of Toronto. This story is just breaking this morning. This is pretty interesting about that city's request for an exemption to federal drug laws, basically. There's a correlation to that story out of BC. But first, let me just put this on your radar. Our friends at Friesen Brothers know that for the May long weekend, obviously coming up, for a lot of you, this is going to be your gardening weekend. This is like the big first gardening weekend of the year, and the Friesen Brothers garden centers are now open. Did you know that more than half, in fact, of the plants that they sell at Friesen Brothers garden centers are actually grown in our home province of Alberta? So that means, what does it mean? Well, it means they're perfectly suited for Alberta weather. Even the potting soil is made right here in Alberta. You can find out more information on selection, which stores can offer it, etc. at friesen.com/garden center. I love these testimonials we're starting to get. Listen, if you've, like I told you, Will yesterday at Friesen Brothers loves the sourdough potato buns, and then we just heard from JR, who studied at Rello and finally passed his real estate exam. What about this one from Beverly? We love this email. Beverly just hired California Closets to help with their renovation. I read her email in full yesterday, but she basically says, here's the gist of it. We thought California Closets was going to be way out of our price range based on how beautiful the work is. She says, but figured multiple quotes don't hurt. We heard Ryan talking about California Closets, so we reached out. What do I have to lose? Free design consultation. Well, basically, Beverly's socks were knocked off by their 3D renderings, and when the price quote came in, she couldn't believe it. And then the fact there's a lifetime warranty, turns out that it was the best quote they received. if you can believe it. And it comes with a lifetime warranty. So she's getting the best in the business for the most affordable price. That's California Closets. Hey, Beverly, congratulations in advance on the completion of your renovation. I know you're going to love your custom closets. You can check them out online. Request that free consultation at californiaclosets.ca. Emissions is one of the big stories in Canada's oil sands. And right now, and by the way, anytime I'm talking about this region, we just want to let you know, to our fellow Albertans, to our friends in the region, the RM of Wood Buffalo and Fort McMurray surrounding areas, we're thinking about you as you're under these evacuation orders. We're praying for so much rain. Right now, of course, our focus is on Alberta's Oil Sands and Pathways Alliance. We talked to Jobs Minister Randy Boissonnault about this a while ago, why the feds are so keen on this program. As Canada's oil sands are on that path to reach net zero emissions from operations, they're going to do it with a planned carbon capture and storage network. Minister says he thinks it's a good idea, thinks it's feasible. The Alberta government in support of it as well. So they're working with different levels of government to offer the world responsibly produced energy. You can learn more about what they're doing by visiting pathwaysalliance.ca. And a quick shout out to those of you, you never know where this message is going to land. But if you're an electrician, if you're an apprentice, if you're a sales professional, or if you love working in office management or HR, Kubi Renewable Energy wants to hear from you. This is one of the fastest growing energy companies in Canada, providing solar energy solutions to power your life. You can check out the careers link at kubienergy.ca to learn more about how they're reshaping the energy portfolio in Canada and how you could be a part of it. Right now, Johnny's showing our YouTube audience the installation Kubi just did at the first net zero fire hall in Canada. That is one of the sexiest solar installations I've ever seen. You didn't think solar panels could be sexy, but they can be with Kubi Energy. If you're hunting for a job, I guarantee you'd love working for these guys. Again, that's the careers link at kubienergy.ca. Interesting story out of Toronto today as the province of Ontario, this is reported by Jeff Gray out of Queen's Park, covering the Ontario legislature for the Globe and Mail. The province of Ontario, Ontario's health minister Sylvia Jones, has basically warned the city of Toronto to drop its request for drug decriminalization, or they say they're going to step in. The minister has warned Toronto's medical officer of health to drop the request for the exemption, which is similar to what BC had requested, an exemption from federal laws to decriminalize the small possession, rather I should say the possession of small amounts of so-called hard drugs, illicit drugs in the city. Says the province will intervene if Toronto doesn't rescind its application. That's Eileen Davila, who's the medical officer of health in Toronto. There was a fatal shooting outside of in Toronto's Leslieville area of a supervised consumption site. We've chatted about that before on the show. Obviously, a tough look. You sort of say, well, that sort of a crime could happen anywhere, but when it happens in front of a supervised consumption site, it's obviously an optical issue, especially for people that are advocating for investment in that type of harm reduction. Sure. But the letter was also signed by Ontario's Solicitor General Michael Kersner, said basically that the province will explore all options available. They say while the government, the provincial government of Ontario, has been perfectly clear on multiple occasions, please consider this as formal as possible. Okay, says Ontario's Solicitor General. Ontario, this is a quote, Ontario is 100% opposed to your proposal. Under no circumstances will our government ever support your request, which would only add to crime and public drug use while doing nothing to support people struggling with addiction. We will also be making our opposition clear to the federal government. So this is an added layer to this story that we covered, the story that we talked about. This was on our May 8th episode of Real Talk. We called it Recriminalization. BC walks back its illicit drug pilot. Who wins? We talked to Guy Felicella, who's a recovery expert, and Mo Amir, a talk show host on Check in the province of BC. Their assessment of BC and Premier David Eby asking the feds to recriminalize.
Is that a word?
I don't know if we made it up. I think it is a word.
It's
we were playing off decriminalize. I mean, it's got to be a word. I've never
heard it before.
But here's one of the reasons why you've never heard it before is because it rarely ever happens. When something's decriminalized, I mean, could Pierre Poilievre move to recriminalize cannabis? I doubt it. No. I think there's a lot of conservatives that are invested in cannabis. There's a lot of us that have lost our freaking shirts investing in cannabis, but I digress. Yeah. So interesting. As BC moves to recriminalize, Ontario steps in and says, hey, Toronto, if you go forward with this is what Pierre Poilievre talked about just a couple of weeks ago, saying, Justin Trudeau, are you going to continue to try to, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, are you going to try to flood Toronto? You try to flood Canada's most populated city with illicit drugs like you did in BC? He called it wacko policy. That's what he was talking about. So this is another layer to that story out of Ontario.
Yeah, and it's hard because what this all boils down to is like most of these people, they weren't addicted to like you said, cannabis. They're not, or booze or anything like that. They're addicted to something that's manufactured medically to help people with stuff. So it just boggles my mind when we say decriminalize and recriminalize. Like they're addicted to opioids, a very highly addictive, highly potent drug that was manufactured by drug companies in the beginning. And what they do is they get on it, and then eventually, they need a cheaper fix. So, heroin and these other dirty kinds of fentanyl that are produced are the way to go. But I don't know what to do here. I mean, yesterday when Amos started spouting off about, being in Europe and they're allowed to walk around with beer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
My mind started going to the decriminalization, the recriminalization, because I think the problem with the whole decriminalization thing is not that we shouldn't put people in jail for having some drugs on them, but the fact that people are just doing drugs everywhere. Like, obviously, we don't want people doing drugs in a park. You don't want to step into an elevator and have someone pull out a crack pipe and take some hoots off it. So I don't know. It's like it comes down to adults and being responsible and figuring out the opioid crisis first. But I personally think, and I think you do too, most drugs should be decriminalized.
Yeah,
most things we ingest,
I think they should be decriminalized,
as an
regulated.
adult.
But I've also lost some faith in, like nobody knew. I mean, I was an advocate for decriminalizing cannabis. I mean, cannabis is not decriminalized in Canada; it's legalized. There's a difference too, right? There's a difference. But cannabis is legalized. I think that all in it's not an experiment. I mean, it is. It's been legalized now for coming up on 6-7 years, wasn't it? 2017, I think it was legalized, if I remember off the top of my head. And so, I know that there has been some squawking from some police groups, or at least ahead of time, they were concerned that there was going to be increased levels of impaired driving. As far as I can tell, that's not been the case. As a matter of fact, I think it's been quite the opposite.
If there was, it'd be in the paper every day.
Yeah, and I don't think, maybe the odd time you're walking down the street and you'll smell somebody smoking a joint, maybe the odd time, but same as when I'm walking past any building and I walk through somebody's gnarly cigarette smoke, so it's it's no different than that. And all in, I just don't think it's been a huge issue. But there's been absolutely nothing done to curb the black market, if that's even possible. Everybody probably thinks back to Nancy Reagan and the war on drugs and how you can't win the war on drugs.
I think they thought it would implode, right?
They maybe thought it would implode, but you say you legalize it, you tax it, and you regulate it, and then everybody's happy, right? It's a form of revenue. You can put that revenue source into healthcare or the justice system or whatever you like. Legal cannabis, for all intents and purposes, has been successful in the sense that there are some LPs, licensed producers, growers, that are doing okay. There's some retail locations that are doing okay. And average, everyday Canadians like me don't have to sneak around and feel like criminals if they would want to have a gummy before they go to the Bruce Springsteen concert. So that has been a success. What has not been a success is that cannabis in legal retail locations is more expensive because it's produced with people making good wages and by companies that have to adhere to Health Canada regulations, and there are excise taxes applied and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So it's more expensive. So a lot of people, my guess, it's totally anecdotal based on absolutely nothing except for what I see around me. My guess would be at least half the people that use cannabis probably still get it from the so-called gray or black markets. There's still websites that are selling cannabis, hash, mushrooms, everything else online that are not legal, but nothing's done to clamp down or crack down on them. So in that sense, if you were to say it was about anything else, if there was anything else, you can't just sell meat out of the back of your car, right? You can't just make beer in your bathtub and sell it.
Well, we can
right?
get into the guys who are selling meat out of their garage here in Edmonton.
But you know what I mean?
I know
like,
what you
if
mean.
You
like,
if you don't crack down, if you say here's the legal place and the legal avenue to buy something, but you don't do anything about the black market, then how do you think the legal market's going to do? And so when it comes to like illicit, or what we're talking about, let's say the hard drugs, like whatever you're talking about, MDMA or cocaine or whatever, I'm sure that there are a lot of people that would love to, like, I think that there's probably more people that use cocaine than people think.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of people that would love to know that they're going to like use a little cocaine at the party. I'm not, whatever. Do you, don't snort cocaine, kids, like, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not a coke guy. I've never done coke in my life, as a matter of fact. But like, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would love to know that they could buy a gram or I don't think they'd call it an 8-ball in the store. They'd probably have some other name for it, but they'd love to know that it was tested and it was safe and they weren't going to overdose. And
especially nowadays,
you know what I mean?
Would.
Like, I'm sure that people would love that, but I have a really hard time believing that it would bring the black market to its knees.
Of course.
I
know people who've dabbled in cocaine and stopped over the last 3 to 5 years because it is so dangerous. If you don't have someone who you know and trust and a provider, there's no way you can call some random or hear from someone and get some drugs on the street and not know that there's not like serious fentanyl or other things in it. Anyways, but what I will say is just BC had this one part wrong. So if I walk into a hospital and I smoke a cigarette, I'm probably going to get a ticket or at least kicked out by security. But you can do drugs in there. There's got to be a better middle ground to this whole thing they were doing, right?
Quinn in our live chat says there's an important note. The opioid epidemic, and Quinn has epidemic in quotes, is not what it is often portrayed as. It is a poisoned supply problem. And Quinn is 100% correct. Says the vast majority of the problems we see about deaths are due to adulterated substances.
100%.
So if you missed our episode, and I know that some of you did, I'm just going to say it straight up. Like, the numbers on YouTube on that episode are not typically where we'd like to see them on important stories. So I know that some of you did not watch it. But Guy Filichella, Mo Amir get into this. And Guy, like, Mo's great. Mo is one of our go-tos for BC. If you want to like know, the finger on the pulse, what do people in BC think about this? But Guy's the expert on harm reduction. Guy has had, I think, 7 of his own overdoses reversed. Like, he's clean now. He's got a beautiful family. Guy is one of the most remarkable Canadians as far as I'm concerned right now. And he's an in-demand speaker. His insight on this, he talks about safe supply. He talks about some of the pushback on safe supply. Obviously, a lot of people have been alleging that safe supply, these sort of safe drugs, the drugs that they know have been tested, and this is a measure toward harm reduction, like what Quinn's getting at, that safe supply is winding up like on college campuses and people are reselling safe supply, and there probably are instances of that. But Guy talks about, the slippery slopes. He talks about how he became addicted to opioids. He talked about his journey in. Hint, it was alcohol, not cannabis. But it was a really good chat. So make sure you check it out. That was our May 8th episode of Real Talk. And we'll obviously keep an eye on that Ontario story to see where it goes. I'd be curious to know, like, if you're Olivia Chow, like if you're the mayor of Toronto or if you're a Toronto councillor, and this request to the feds for this exemption, this basically Health Canada exemption, is active, and you see Premier Eby in BC, right? You see BC walk back, and these are the lefties in BC,
I
right?
know.
I mean, I'm being general, but like BC,
But I'd be pissed, 'cause
if
they fucked it up.
BC is walking this back, if you're Toronto,
Everyone's fucked now.
what's your message to your voters? What's your message to people living in Toronto? Like, it didn't work in BC, but we think it's going to work here. Now, I know that Guy Filichella wants to see it work. And so there are people that I'm sure will be emailing Mayor Chow today saying, stick with it, stand steadfast. But if Toronto's now got to fight a battle with the province, just like municipalities are fighting battles with the province here in Alberta, a new episode of The Discourse out today, by the way, with Cheryl Oates, Erica Baruti's about exactly that, about Bill 21, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't. Every time someone goes back and tries to fix this decriminalization, I'm putting it in quotes. They're always going to reference this now.
Yeah.
BC tried it. There's no way. I think BC has screwed the pooch for everybody. I will reference, you were saying, Guy, the best thing about his story is that when he finally got sober, it was because of safe injection sites.
Yeah.
He was actually brought back at a safe injection site, and one of the women who worked there actually cried and said, hey, I know one day I'm going to come here to work. You're not going to be here. You're going to be dead. And he realized something switched, like a light switch inside a guy. Oh my God, the stranger gives a shit.
It's true,
that
man.
if I exist.
Yeah.
I mean, his whole story, his first appearance on our show was one of the best, but he's been on a few times. But it's one of the arguments for safe injection, maybe not safe supply, but at least a place for people to go, because it can be a place that leads to rehabilitation.
Yeah.
In an instant.
Well, and you're 100% right. And safe supply is interesting because, like, supervised consumption is one thing. And apparently people working there, they don't like the word safe anymore. They prefer supervised, right?
I know,
Even though no one has died, in the more than 20 years.
I'm just used to saying it,
Of
but-
course it is,
Yeah,
right? And
but-
that's what they called them for years. But at Inside in Vancouver, I think it's been open 20, 30, something like maybe 30 years. They have never had a death on site ever.
There you
ever.
go.
And then we're talking East Hastings in Vancouver. This is like ground zero in
Have you
Canada
been
for
lately?
the crisis. So yeah, I was.
It's worse than when I lived there.
It's wild, man.
It's insane.
Interesting comment here from Alberta Ganger, who I now know how to pronounce in the chat.
Not Ginger.
Hey, so you know how we aired the best of Real Talk Thursday, Friday last week, and I spent all morning in the chat with you beauties and had so much fun doing that, answering your questions and talking. Alberta Ganger heard me properly pronounce their name, their handle, and threw $5 into the super chat for it, Johnny.
Wow.
So I wanted to let you know that. So $5 toward the Real Talk Beer Fund from Alberta Ganger, who says they say Jespo talking 50-50, half and half on black market, legal market for cannabis in Canada. Half might be too much. Canada puts it around 20%. I'm assuming you're talking 20% still buying it black market. Maybe
Yeah.
you're talking the other way around. It says, but the black market is only growing, and I love this comment from them. They say elderly retired ladies in my town buy cigarettes online to avoid taxes.
What?
And my friends buy psychedelics and other stuff online all the time. Mine too. Friends of mine, we talked to Dana Larson. Remember this, the episode we did, Johnny? This was just right around the holiday break, right around the Christmas break. And Dana Larson, you remember this, Real Talkers? He's the guy that mailed magic mushrooms to every MLA in BC for Christmas. Obviously, it's illegal. Also, who cares? Mushrooms should obviously be legal. That's next on my list. But so we talked to him, and he's talking to us about his website, and it's obviously not legal. But you can go on his website and buy
It's crazy.
Buy whatever you want,
Yeah.
any kind of mushroom you want. So it is legal. And Alberta Ganger, I know you're bang on in this as well, because as soon as remember when menthols were outlawed, when menthol cigarettes were no longer available to be sold in Canada, because I guess people thought like the flavored cigarettes were kind of drawing
Sure.
more kids in. Well, who mostly smokes menthols? Like, if I'm generalizing here, little old ladies mostly the target market for menthols.
I can also think of a couple assholes that I know that smoke menthols.
But people were laughing.
only
just saying,
at
like,
festivals in
only at
June
festivals.
and July.
But people were saying like these are. Have you ever smoked those cigarettes that they have the button? I think you know in the States, and you push the button on
yeah,
the
you
filter,
crack
and
it.
it
Yeah.
turns it
Yeah.
into a menthol.
Yeah.
It's like a regular cigarette. Then you push the button, it becomes a menthol. I'm like, does anybody think about like what that is? It's just like releasing stuff into the filter that
And then you
changes
nail
the.
it.
Oh my gosh! But anyway. As soon as menthols were outlawed in Canada, people said there's going to be more and more menthols falling off trucks. You just watch. You just wait and see. That's the way it's going to go. I wanted to get to a couple of your emails today, Real Talkers, because these are really good ones, including one from Shane. We got this yesterday from Shane after we talked to Amber Bracken, the photojournalist. As a matter of fact, she was awarded in 2023 the World Press Photo of the Year. So she's an accomplished photojournalist, and she's got an amazing photo essay in the newest issue. I can't get that right. The newest issue of Alberta Views magazine, albertaviews.ca, where she tells the story of a 10-year-old girl who ran in Alberta the length of the Gaza Strip, 40 kilometers, her run for the children. And it's just a beautiful feature about a really tough subject, obviously, that Amber wrote. And so Amber comes on the show to talk to us about this. You can read her work at albertaviews.ca. Don't forget the promo code AVRJ knocks 50% off a subscription to Alberta Views at albertaviews.ca. But Amber also talked about the state of journalism. It was World Press Freedom Day earlier this month. We try not to talk too much about our industry because we know that some of you have limited interest in that, but I do think that it's important to look at the state of media. It's accountability is important, storytelling is important, analysis is important. If not, this show wouldn't be here. And this was a quick take from Amber before we get to Shane's email. So this was Johnny, what was this day? The episode of this would have been May 14th. This was our Tuesday episode of Real Talk. Amber Bracken. So she basically, you got it? Yeah. Okay, here's Amber Bracken.
It's not an us and them. The society that I want to live in is one where you can ask questions and you can have.
Just having a trouble here. Just one second.
It's okay. It's all good. I kind of liked, actually, if we start putting like those music beds under our clips, people, it sort of like accentuates what they have to say.
Okay,
but no, she's in all seriousness talking about the state of journalism in Canada.
It's not an us and them. The society that I want to live in is one where you can ask questions and you can have robust dialogue. And I also think that there's, in the tweet that you read out there, like, one of the things that I'm getting at is also this idea that people are angry about civil rights and about press violations when it's their partisan team. So, I see people gloating from one side of the fence or the other about difficulties in different outlets based on how they perceive them to be aligned. So, I see kind of like lefties celebrating National Post issues with the National Post and celebrating layoffs there, and on the other side I see people celebrating layoffs at CTV and CBC. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in all cases we're getting less people asking questions of power, less people trying to tell you what's going on. And it's not about only getting information that you like or that you totally agree with, but the more people asking questions is really better for all of us.
That's Amber Bracken on the May 14th episode of Real Talk. So it prompts this email, a great email from Shane, who says, this is my first time writing into the show. First time, long time, basically. He says, I've been a loyal listener for the past couple of years. Love it, Shane. Thank you. Says, I listened to the pod the day after on my drive, and your discussion with Amber Bracken really struck a chord with me. It seems to me, says Shane, that journalism's dying a slow death, and it's as troubling as it is the underpinning of our democratic system. One of the all-time greats, Walter Cronkite, said journalism is what we need to make democracy work. And it's obvious when you consider democracy relies fundamentally on the electorate, on John or Jill public to make informed decisions when casting their ballots. Yet our faith in the news media has waned as of late. And Shane's right, it has. Says there's probably maybe three primary reasons from this. He says profit-driven journalism is one of them. A lot more outlets are more interested in selling the story than telling the truth. I like that. He says a lot of times there's an overabundance of doom and gloom pieces, oftentimes repeated ad nauseum. Fear sells. Politicians and media executives know it. They don't want to waste valuable airtime on important but less sensational stories. Shane, we talk about this all the time. We do important episodes. We don't oftentimes like pull back the curtain and talk about our downloads and the business side of what we do. But some of the stories we tell, some of the episodes we do, we know they're not going to do as well, but we know they're important to talk about. That's an important part of doing what we do. I could talk about Daniel Smith and Pierre Poilievre every single day and have triple the subscribers. It's a guarantee, but it's not our role. It's not our responsibility, right? He says, number two, lack of access. Says Amber Bracken hit this nail on the head. In the States, governments post online substantially more information about their daily activities than they do in Canada. You can look up full contracts. Who's lobbying who? The U.S. government is more accountable with journalists having open access to the inner workings of government. We need our journalists to have unrestricted public access to where stories are occurring so they can provide firsthand accounts of what's actually happening in our communities. Amber and I talk about the work done by Robin Doolittle in that Secret Canada series. Robin was with us on the show about a year ago talking about it. And he says, and the third problem, as far as I can tell, says Shane, is dilution of the profession. When polled, people can oftentimes, when asked about the most respected professions, talk about doctors, teachers, engineers, nurses, I guess depending on who you're talking to, right? Journalists should be on this list. He says on a 2023 Gallup poll on respected professions, they ranked journalists below the clergy, below labor union leaders, but above bankers, politicians, and car salespeople. All those poor car salespeople. If you don't like dealing with car salespeople, by the way, check out Tice Automotive Consultants, right? At ticeautomotive.com. They present Charles Adler weekly here on Real Talk. I couldn't help myself. He says that's a real big problem, though, because we need to trust our journalists for the work to have value. When every Yahoo with a GoPro or a webcam or a YouTube channel is calling themselves a journalist, promoting their opinion as the honest news, despite erroneous facts and half-truths, it makes the public question the intention of every journalist. You're right, Shane, again. He says, so not to be the person who only points out problems but doesn't propose any solutions, I suggest the following. Like teachers, doctors, and engineers, journalists need a strong professional organization enabled in legislation that holds them and their companies professionally accountable through peer review and self-regulation. Interesting. Now, there is the Canadian Association of Journalists, the CAJ, but it's not what you're talking about further. You're talking about more. He says, in exchange for this professional peer oversight, the titles of journalist, reporter, and news should be protected titles, restricted to those who have the education and experience to hold those titles and who have committed to journalistic integrity. Ryan talking now. This reminds me of that battle that we've been seeing in Alberta. Remember when the consulting engineers of Alberta, who I do work with, full disclosure, I host their Showcase Awards Gala. Love that association. Wonderful people. But they're pissed off that software engineers are being called engineers. They don't like it. They're trying to protect the designation of engineers. They want to see professional certification. Engineers are deadly serious about this stuff. Medical colleges, I'm not talking about schools. I'm talking about like the College of Physicians and Surgeons. They're obviously very protective, just like Shane's talking about. Is that viable in journalism? I don't know. He says companies who employ these professionally licensed journalists and want to represent themselves as news agencies should also be required to obtain a license from such an organization. I wonder what that would mean for us. And we don't call ourselves news. I don't call myself a journalist. I wonder what that would mean for us, if anything. He says, let me just end by saying, says Shane, I listen to Real Talk because I believe the program is a diamond in the rough. With so much half-baked reporting in the mainstream media, opinion cloaked as fact in the alternative media, Real Talk's open and balanced approach to exploring important stories of the day is refreshing. So thank you for that. And here, I've been looking forward to reading this. And a big call out to Johnny. The quality of your production is among the highest I listen to. It is the best of all the live streaming shows. Johnny, Ryan is lucky to have you. That from Shane.
Stop.
I love it.
Stop.
I appreciate that from you, Shane.
Stop.
I appreciate it. We also, and I wanted to get to this too, because this was an interesting one on Bill 18. We've been talking a lot in Alberta on Bill 18 and Bill 20. Right? And now there's Bill 21. Make sure you check out or download the Discourse. New episode out, 2 hours ago. They talk about Bill 21. They say it's another UCP power grab. To get Erica Barudis, the founding president of the UCP, to sign her name to an episode where the title is Another Power Grab by the UCP, that's a pretty remarkable thing, by the way. So back on April 17th, I can't believe it was almost a month ago. It was like a month ago. We had a round table trying to break down Bill 18, what it mean for post-secondaries. This is basically to remind you, and we're going to get to a clip here. This was the bill that basically Danielle Smith is saying that she wants all federal funding to pass, my words, not hers, a provincial purity test, right? She wants all federal funding, whether it's for research, health programs, schools, housing. She wants it to go through the province to ensure it meets, it's called the Provincial Priorities Act, right? And post-secondaries are saying, this is going to screw us big time. And so we wanted to get their take on it. And so here's a clip. Here's a highlight from that episode of ours back on April 17th. And then we'll get to
16th.
Was it April 16th? Thanks, Johnny. And we'll get to Cyril's email right after that.
One of the highest funded disciplines through the social sciences and Humanities Research Council is actually business management and administrative studies. And in Alberta, business management and administrative studies specifically occupied one of the largest portions of funding. And a lot of research done through that discipline is something that the UCP openly supports. With the argument for Bill 18 and for including post-secondary education institutions in it is that all the funding is being unfairly allocated to certain progressive disciplines. We have the data to absolutely refute that. That is in no way the case.
The federal government does not interfere, does not pick winners and losers when it comes to research for these grants. The federal government gives a pot of money to the tri-councils and a lot of other organizations, NSERC, CFI, whatever, and says, go do your business. Make Canada better. Make us smarter. Make us richer. Make us wealthier. Make us healthier. End of story. It's preposterous for a premier in Canada to go out there and start lobbying this stuff around without any proof, without any information, without any knowledge of how things actually work.
Things like, LGBTQ issues, questions having to do with Indigenous peoples, people who have been marginalized for a very long time within our society, including Black people. Those are kind of things that I don't think the Alberta government is very interested in right now. But necessarily, they have to be funded because they speak to the issue of justice and fairness, the inclusiveness of individuals and within our society. And I think if you want to be a government of Albertans, you ought to be a government of all Albertans.
All right, so that was our April 16th episode of Real Talk. If you want to go back and listen, it was an awesome panel just talking about how funding happens at universities, where the sources of funding are, how it's procured, accountability. It was the three Andys. That was Dr. Andy Knight you were talking. That was Andy Grabia before him, former social media manager for the University of Alberta. So that was kind of an interesting perspective. And then Andrea Decyretti, who was the first voice you heard, a PhD candidate at the U of A. So Cyril hears this. And he wrote in and he said, he says, I'm close, and I'm protecting Cyril's identity here. It says, I work closely with somebody in one of the granting agencies for funding, and my own job is adjacent. I've spent some time auditing post-secondary and public institutions over the course of my career. Now, this is a real can of worms that's been opened, and says, but the Canadian research ecosystem is due for a look under the hood. Says this can be evidenced by the number of parliamentary committees which have met on various aspects over the past 2 years alone. And here's some thoughts for Real Talkers to consider. I tell you guys, you have the smartest audience, and this is, again and again and again, you prove it. Says, number one, it's very easy to look up what's been funded. I can do that too. Number two, it's less easy to know what has not been funded because there's not been enough money to cover the grant application, and it is even tougher to know which grants didn't make the cut at all. And I know that universities know this, and I think it would be appropriate for the province to know this. What's the success rate of all submitted grants from Alberta as compared to their counterparts in Ontario and Quebec? Alberta pushes innovation, right? It pushes innovation in the country. And it would be a darn shame if projects submitted were considered too risky or not feasible by old school peer review committees with their own bias. And of course, some applications may just be poor quality. That's good to know too. So could there be a bias in adjudication? That's a very fair question that's raised by the research community itself all the time. And even as an auditor, they love to share this. You know, next time you have a guest on, Ryan, you should ask if they know anybody who's written a grant because it's fundable as opposed to a grant they actually want. This is due to university administration interference. They're funding the sure shot grants versus what I feel could be the most cutting-edge science or the most promising talent. You know, you did a podcast a while ago on the loss of international students and that impact on the university's bottom line. And that's probably going to exacerbate this problem in order to obtain necessary cash for research support funding, like for computers and labs, which comes as a portion of each successful grant the institution receives. This is political. And finally, says Cyril, we need to acknowledge that universities are provincially funded, reliant on federal grant support, and have antiquated business models. Research is important, but public funds are under strain. There are improvements to be had that are necessary, and I really hope that all Alberta researchers take this opportunity to step up and share their concerns and visions with the province and everybody that's conducting these reviews. Now, I understand, says Cyril, that there's a lack of trust in the community with the UCP government and specifically with the Premier, Danielle Smith. I also understand it's very likely that government staffers are listening to your show. This is too important, and we must lead, but it's important to have everybody on board acting in good faith rather than having this conversation privately amongst colleagues on the shoulder of research conferences that are praying for institutional change or praying for money to grow on trees. The province needs to have this conversation in public with radical transparency and lead the country like Alberta always has. Thanks for the real talk. Longtime Patreon supporter, Cyril. So I thought that was cool too. An interesting, different take on it, a different perspective from somebody that has knowledge of it, working knowledge of it. There's never one perspective on a story, like never, ever one perspective on a story. And we always appreciate your response to this, your takes on this, your interpretations of what you're hearing. You can send us an email anytime to talk@ryanjesperson.com. You know, we mentioned Albertans, some BC residents as well that are right now dealing, like on the front lines, some of them with wildfires. And it just reminds us to remind you that if you do find yourself in a situation where you've got to either deal with some smoke damage, maybe you're completely rebuilding a property, The team at Complete Care Restoration understands the magnitude of that. They understand firsthand what it's like to lose a property, what it's like to see serious damage to your biggest investment, what it's like to need to get your business up and running again. They've been restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind for more than a quarter century. They're ready to respond 24/7. They come highly recommended, not just from us, but from real talkers like Neil, who reached out to them just a couple of weeks ago and emailed us to tell us about what a positive experience it was. Heaven forbid, if disaster strikes, make sure you remember CompleteCareRestoration.ca. And Johnny, before we sign off for the day, I wanted to say one more time, I appreciated hearing from Ronnie yesterday and from Steve yesterday. Both of you, I wanted to give you a shout out, reached out to let us know that you had signed up to participate in the Real Talk Golf Classic. Woo. That's coming up on Thursday, June 20th. I think we have 8 teams still to go till we sell out. So what's that? 32 golfers. I think we got 32 more spots if the numbers, if I've seen it up to speed. This is the Real Talk Golf Classic presented by our friends at CWB Wealth in support of the Real Talk Julie Rohr Scholarship. Thursday, June 20th, a 2 p.m. shotgun start at the ranch. It is the most fun golf tournament in Edmonton and the only golf tournament in Edmonton that has 3 shots at $100,000 on our hole-in-ones, 3 shots at $100,000, and a shot at a brand new vehicle. And we're not doing a lease on a new vehicle. You win the vehicle. There's no other golf tournament in the city of Edmonton giving away potentially a vehicle and $300,000. It's the Real Talk Golf Classic presented by CWB Wealth. Go to RyanJesperson.com, click on the events link to join us June 20th at the ranch. We got our new golf shirts for the Golf Classic. You and I
spring vibes.
I kind of like it. It's the one day you and I get to be matchy. I want to thank you for joining us on this episode, and just remind you that if you've heard something in follow-up, actually, before we go, Johnny, I want to read a couple of more emails, but I do want to remind you that stories are never done on this show, right? So it's not like a case closed when we do an episode on something and then we read someone's email response and then that's it. If something that you've heard in this episode is resonating with you, we encourage you to be in touch with the show. We do our best to make sure we get as many emails as we can out to your fellow Real Talkers like this one. And I wanted to wrap with this. Remember, this was a bit of a tough email to read, but it was a moving one. A while ago, this was right at the beginning of May. This would have been on May 2nd. I read that email from Cheryl about her daughter, Grace. Do you remember this? I had spoken to Andrea Heinz. Andrea is now a sex trade abolitionist. In other words, she believes that the governments need to crack down harder on selling sex in Canada, which is an interesting perspective because she owned and operated a brothel. Andrea herself sold sex for like 7 years. She's got a new book out, When Men Sell Sex, Who Really Pays? And it was a powerful episode. Cheryl wrote in to talk to us about it, and she told the story of her daughter, Grace, and it was a very moving one. I recommend you listen to the entire email. I read that on our May 2nd episode. So Jay wrote in, and I wanted to wrap with this. The subject line, just a dad kind of crying. And Jay said, I just finished your May 2nd episode. I don't often listen live, but I never miss a show. So Jay, I hope you hear us read this, and I appreciate you. He says, Real Talk's just too damn important to Alberta and informing the public when others who are for now in charge will not. He says, I'm sitting here at my desk writing this, and I got tears in my eyes. That email from Cheryl, the mother, who all but lost her daughter, was a lot of things, and I am feeling many of those things as the dad of a young preschooler, and maybe even just as a fellow human being. My daughter will one day grow up to be a young woman, and I can't help but feel Cheryl's pain. You can do everything right, as best you know how, and this could still end up being the path. As parents, we know that we can't protect our kids forever, but man, that's so crushing to hear that happen to a family that was always there for their daughter. I don't know the point of my email. I just felt like writing to share my thoughts, and I hope that Cheryl hears this and finds future peace and happiness with her daughter, Grace. Thank you for what you do at Real Talk. Never stop informing us. Never stop asking questions until they answer. That from Jay. Well, guess what, Jay? Cheryl also wrote in. She heard us read her email, and she wrote in and said, you read my letter. Wow. She said, I wanted to thank you and Real Talkers for taking in my email about my daughter, my beloved daughter, Grace, and her struggles with addiction. I was listening that day, and I broke down a number of times as you read my words. These are hard stories to share as we live them. And the goal is really just to be real so that others struggling know that they can be real. We need to normalize struggle. Cheryl says, one of my former colleagues, her son, the same age as my daughter, died 2 years ago from an accidental overdose of drug poisoning while struggling with trauma and addiction. He was a university star football player, very popular, loved by his family. His mom wanted to talk about what they were going through, but also how do you share those private, intimate details about your child without experiencing or worsening the stigma and without encountering comments that can be very hurtful and rarely helpful, exposing your child or your child's legacy to harm. Now that he's gone, she tells his story all the time, regretting that she couldn't find a way to say more when he was alive. We don't count on them dying, and they don't plan on dying. Cheryl says, I hope still to this day that Grace outlives me. I hope she does not become a statistic. For now, I have to tell her story. I have to tell our family's story as best I can. We don't know what tomorrow holds, and I hope her story helps others. That from Cheryl. Cheryl, I've never met you. We love you, and we thank you for this. We love Grace too, and we ask that you keep us posted as you see fit. When we ask for your emails, we meet them. When we ask for your feedback, we mean them. When we ask for your support, we mean it. If this episode resonated with you, please go ahead. If you don't subscribe to our YouTube channel or our podcast, please do so. Like the episode, share it with people that you think may be moved by what we're talking about. Coming up on our Friday episode of Real Talk, this is going to be May 17th. We're going to pick up where Amarjeet Sohi left off at the Edmonton Chamber's Mayor's State of the City address. What's his vision for Edmonton as it fights with the province, as it grapples with a 9% property tax increase, as downtown development and occupancy hasn't grown as expected? Mayor Sohi's going to sit down with me and the CEO of the Chamber. Doug Griffiths will be here for a Real Talk Roundtable you will not want to miss. We'll see you then.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.